The year was 1998. A team of over 30 explorers vanished in the Himalayas. All that was left behind was a vague message: "Don't come looking for us. Blow this place up fast." No one knew what they'd encountered. Years later, another expedition ventured there. Of 18 people, only one returned, driven mad. She trembled, telling everyone, "Goddess, we found an immortal goddess in the underground ice layer." Buckle up, folks. This story is pretty chilling and bizarre. It might just mess with your worldview. So, if you're easily spooked, grab a brave kid to watch with you. Alright, let's dive in. I woke up from a dream. Sunlight streamed warmly through the window. It was Saturday morning, 7 o'clock, but I was already crawling out of bed. It had been 10 years since I first summited Mount Everest, taking the South Col route from Nepal, a small plane from Kathmandu to Everest Base Camp, and then 6 days to the summit. As a mountaineering enthusiast, conquering Everest was, without a doubt, one of the most brilliant achievements of my life. Over the years, countless famous peaks had fallen beneath my feet, from Mount Blanc to Kilimanjaro, even Denali. Mountaineering held a unique allure for me. Those mountains, formed over billions of years, were a testament to Earth's power, a divine miracle beyond human imagination. Every climb was a sacred ritual, a chance to ascend a unique wonder and feel the backbone of the world. But right now, I was drowning in debt. I ran a specialty mountaineering gear shop, because I focused on professional-grade equipment. My prices were pretty high. Most climbing enthusiasts didn't need such specialized gear, so my business largely relied on friends in the climbing community. Then the pandemic hit. Entry and exit regulations between countries became incredibly strict, forcing globetrotting climbers to cancel their plans. This severely impacted my business. The dismal sales forced me to temporarily close my shop, and I planned to head back home for a few days of rest. Just then, I got a call from Ray. "Big order coming in," Ray excitedly told me, ordering dozens of sets of professional climbing gear. He invited me over, saying he'd landed a huge deal and knew I was struggling, so he wanted to bring me in on some extra cash. Ray and I met while climbing. He also owned a climbing gear shop in Dingri County, at the foot of Everest, and often stocked up from me. We had a working relationship. I'd give his contact info to friends planning to climb Everest, and he'd help arrange their trips. I figured since business was slow and I hadn't been to Tibet in years, a trip would be nice. So, I shipped the products and flew to Lhasa, then transferred to Dingri. Ray, who had lived in high-altitude regions for years, had skin tanned by the intense UV rays. He warmly welcomed me into his shop and thoroughly explained the big order he'd landed. An overseas billionaire, whose ancestors were Qing dynasty princes who had emigrated in the late Qing dynasty, had recently sought out over a dozen famous climbing teams worldwide. He was spending a fortune to get them to take him up a part of the Himalayan range. Since the area he wanted to go to was in China, the climbing teams had to gather there. Ray had a bit of a reputation in the climbing world, so some foreign friends contacted him, hoping he could help with the reception and preparations. They also told him that if he knew any experienced Chinese climbers, he should invite them along, as the compensation was substantial. Since the climbing teams needed professional-grade equipment, and Ray didn't have enough, he contacted me. He figured, why let the money go to outsiders? So, he called me in. "We're not climbing Everest this time," he said. "We're climbing the Poetis Ferry Peak. If you wanted Everest, you'd go to the Sherpas on the other side." Poetis Ferry Peak? I couldn't recall that name. It must be a local Tibetan name. I searched online but couldn't find any related information, mostly just legends. It probably didn't have an official name. I asked several times, but the person relaying messages for the billionaire couldn't explain it either. It seemed only the billionaire knew exactly which mountain it was. Before I could say more, someone entered. Ray pulled me over to greet him. "Lee, this is my friend, also in the climbing gear business. He's climbed many mountains. And this is Yang Wen. He just arrived in Dingri the day before yesterday. He's the advance party for the climbing teams coming later." Yang Wen looked young, barely in his early 20s, but Ray said he was quite famous overseas. At 17, he'd climbed Nanga Parbat, the world's 9th highest peak, with his father. In the years since, he'd continued to challenge himself, conquering 3 peaks over 8,000 meters worldwide. Truly impressive achievements. Yang Wen politely greeted me, then started asking Ray about the preparation work. During the conversation, I learned the billionaire's surname was Jean. He was over 60, had never been to China, and couldn't even speak Chinese, but for some unknown reason, he had suddenly become interested in China recently, especially the Himalayas. He invited many Everest climbers to his mansion, asking them to recount their experiences and encounters. Last month, he finally decided to come in person. Money's good, isn't it? Ray sighed after seeing Yang Wen off. Indeed, there was a saying circulating online, as long as you pay enough, you can be carried up Everest. Over the next half-month, climbing teams arrived in Dingri one after another. Many were big names in our community, even national-level mountaineers. I once again marveled at the power of money. To hire these people, the cost would surely be in the tens of millions. The billionaire arrived a month later, flying directly from Lhasa to Dingri by helicopter. However, the old man suffered severe altitude sickness, taking several days to recover. I worried he might not make it. When Mr. Jean disembarked from the helicopter, he was wearing a black insulated suit. His figure looked extremely thin, his eyes sunken deep into their sockets, and the skin on his cheeks had lost its elasticity, sagging. He didn't look well. Yang Wen helped him off the plane and took him to a hotel to rest. Accompanying him were several seemingly well-mannered middle-aged men, who were also suffering terribly from altitude sickness and were being wheeled away for oxygen. I thought the old man would rest for at least a few days, but to my surprise, on the third night, he sent word that everyone was to depart the next day. At 6 in the morning, before dawn, everyone was roused. The team comprised 165 people, 17 local guides, and the remaining 158, apart from the old man, were all professional mountaineers, including myself, all seasoned veterans. Ray, Yang, a Tibetan guide, and I sat in the lead vehicle, following the old man's coordinates. The poetess fairy is one of the 5 auspicious long-life goddesses we worship, the Tibetan guide, Dondrup, explained. They control good fortune, longevity, wisdom, wealth, and livestock. Later, after Padmasambhava came to Tibet, the 5 goddesses became protectors of Buddhism. Finally, the 5 goddesses transformed into 5 sacred mountains. Sioma, the goddess of wisdom, is the most beautiful, so she became Mount Everest. The poetess fairy oversees livestock breeding. When our yaks give birth to calves, my mother will prostrate herself towards the sacred mountain, thanking the poetess fairy for her protection. Dondrup, whose name in Tibetan meant accomplishment, certainly lived up to it. He ran a successful tourism company and was well known for hosting tourists. At 6 in the morning in Tibet, it was still dark. Outside lay an endless Gobi desert, with only the howling wind audible through the car window. Dondrup enthusiastically regaled us with Tibetan legends and the story of the 5 goddesses. There was another version of the 5 goddesses' tale. Long ago, when the Himalayas were still an ocean, a 5-headed venomous dragon emerged from the sea, releasing poisonous gases and causing widespread suffering. The 5 goddesses descended from the heavens and subdued the venomous dragon. Just as they were about to return to the celestial realm, the people implored them to stay and protect all living beings. The kind-hearted 5 goddesses agreed to their plea. The goddesses made the sea recede, transforming the east into forests, the west into fertile fields, the south into gardens, and the north into pastures. They, in turn, became the Himalayas, sheltering their people. We listened to the story with awe. Dondrup, getting carried away, even sang us a Tibetan folk song. The car was filled with cheerful spirits. As we continued along the national highway, the GPS suddenly prompted us to turn. Dondrup was a bit surprised, as the area ahead was a vast, sparsely populated wilderness. However, he didn't hesitate, turning the steering wheel and leading the convoy off the main road and onto the Gobi. The sun gradually rose, painting the snow-capped mountains golden. They stood majestically, as they had for millions of years. Everyone was captivated by this masterpiece of nature. Following the coordinates, the convoy arrived at a campsite at the foot of a mountain range. It wasn't far from Everest. From the slope, you could vaguely see the perpetually ice-covered summit of Everest. Gentlemen, this is our destination, Poetess Fairy Peak, Mr. Jean said in fluent English as he stepped out of the car. This journey might not be easy, but as long as you can help me reach my destination, I can offer an additional substantial reward on top of the previously agreed upon compensation. The climbing team cheered. Dondrup wasn't entirely sure if this was indeed Poetess Fairy Peak. Most people only knew it through oral tradition, and its exact location was unknown. This mountain was also over 7,000 meters, about 23,000 feet high and seemed unclimbed. Or perhaps it wasn't a single peak but a continuous mountain range. At the foot of the mountains lay dense forests and a clear crescent lake. The mountainsides were perpetually covered in snow. Undoubtedly, traversing the forest ahead wouldn't be difficult. The snowy terrain above was the real challenge. At the campsite, an advance team had already set up camp days ago and had made several exploratory ascents. The old man's destination was a valley, requiring crossing 3 snow-covered mountains. Due to the harsh environment, helicopters couldn't reach it. Only humans could. Everyone sat in the large tent. According to the advance team's findings, the journey to the final destination would take about 7 to 10 days. The path, if not fraught with peril, was at least incredibly difficult. It was covered in glaciers and bottomless crevasses. One misstep would mean certain death. However, no one backed down. The prospect of hundreds of thousands of dollars per person was too tempting. Even I had received an advance payment, which was undoubtedly life-saving money for me at the moment. Despite the danger, everyone gathered to discuss possible routes. That afternoon, 3 climbing teams from Switzerland, the United States, and Italy, totaling 28 people, formed another advance party. Stocked with supplies and equipment, they ascended the mountain. They would go as far as possible to find the most feasible and safest route. As the old man's health was delicate and couldn't tolerate any mishaps, the advance team was on the mountain for 10 days, but only 20 returned. 4 people tragically died, one falling into a crevasse. His body never recovered. Seeing that lives had been lost, many people started to reconsider and demanded to withdraw, but the old man immediately doubled the compensation. Except for a few individuals, the rest chose to stay. The advance team members were in very poor spirits. They shivered wrapped in warm blankets, muttering incessantly. Several kept saying they had seen incredible things. One Tibetan guide even clutched Dondrup's clothes, repeatedly emphasizing that there was a goddess, or perhaps it was high-altitude psychosis. Ray said, and I knew, that those few individuals had undoubtedly fallen into this state. People at altitudes above 7,000 meters, about 23,000 feet, are prone to mental confusion and severe hallucinations. I had experienced it before. I once saw a Godzilla on the summit. This was purely a case of mental disorientation, possibly related to cerebral edema and lack of oxygen. However, it wasn't a major issue. Once back in a normal environment, the symptoms would gradually subside. It was likely the unexpected death of their teammates that had severely traumatized these few members, causing them to temporarily fall into confusion. However, the advance team was not without gains. The farthest they reached was less than 60 kilometers, about 37 miles, from the destination. All the obstacles along the way were recorded. Surprisingly, there were many frozen areas that could be used as supply points. After thorough planning, everyone finally decided to depart in 4 teams. Team 1 continued to mark and clear the path. Team 2 was responsible for carrying the main supplies and establishing supply points along the way. Team 3 took the old man up the mountain. Team 4 remained at base camp for support. I was assigned to Team 3, responsible for escorting the old man. This team was the largest, with over 70 people. Ray and Dondrup were in Team 2, responsible for supplies. On the 3rd day after Team 1 departed, Ray and Dondrup, with large backpacks, waved goodbye to us. They were to establish an advanced base to prepare for our final arrival at the destination. The night before our departure, as I slept in my warm tent, I suddenly had a nightmare. It was about my climb up the Alps. I was in the pristine white snow, following my teammates towards the summit. I felt a terrible sense of numbness enveloping me, something I had never experienced before, like pressure on my brain nerves. I started to hallucinate and hear things. I heard whispers in my ear, as if something beneath the white snow was watching my every move. I couldn't distinguish between heaven and earth. Everything before me was flawlessly white. Then, the sky suddenly darkened. A sudden blizzard trapped us behind a rock. I heard the murmuring again. I couldn't tell what language it was, as if someone was speaking in a low voice, not wanting me to understand. The world grew darker and darker, and my hallucinations worsened. I saw myself lying leisurely on a beach in swim trunks. I knew consciously it was a hallucination, but I couldn't fight it, constantly flashing between lucidity and illusion. I was losing my grip on reality. I saw countless people in swimsuits standing in the blizzard, beckoning me to join them. At my feet was a bottomless abyss. One wrong step, and I'd be eternally lost, shattered to pieces. My teammates noticed my abnormality and quickly gave me oxygen. Half asleep, half awake, I seemed to catch a glimpse of a giant shadow flashing behind them. Its figure was grander than the mountains. Nothing beneath heaven and earth could be more magnificent than it. As for us, before it, we were but insignificant dust. You might not believe it, but I saw a Godzilla there, I mumbled. I woke from the dream, drenched in sweat. Outside, the wind still howled fiercely, much like that time in the Alps. I worried about Ray and the others on the mountain, hoping they had found suitable shelter. For some reason, I felt a vague unease. This climb would definitely not be smooth sailing. The good news was that the next day, the wind and snow stopped, and Team 2 sent back word. They had avoided the storm and successfully linked up with Team 1, beginning to build the advance base. The bad news was that, despite thorough preparations this time, one person unfortunately died, and several suffered frostbite. With a command from the old man, Team 3 set off in full force. This team was composed of the world's most excellent and outstanding mountaineers. Almost everyone had over 6 years of climbing experience and had multiple ascents of snow-capped mountains above 6,000 meters, about 20,000 feet. Each was an absolute expert in this field. Their professionalism was astonishing. The forest ahead was not a major issue. The team advanced along the cleared path. Birds sang and flowers bloomed along the way. Yongwen continuously took photos, and the team members chatted and laughed, as if on a leisurely outing. The old man was in the middle of the team, constantly conversing with someone. The few middle-aged men who came with the old man had remained at the campsite. Only one Singaporean, in his 50s, insisted on coming up the mountain with us. It was said he was also of Chinese descent, and his ancestors had some connection with the old man's family, perhaps also Qing dynasty nobles who fled overseas. The two walked slowly with their trekking poles. Considering Mr. Jin's stamina, this climbing expedition was expected to last half a month. I kept taking photos. I liked to record the scenery of the journey, and also to document my moments of reaching the summit. After about 5 or 6 hours, the surrounding vegetation began to thin, and the ground gradually became covered in white snow. The temperature noticeably dropped. Leading the way was a Frenchman named Pierre, a well-known figure in the climbing community with over 20 years of experience. He consistently controlled the team's speed, ensuring we didn't expend too much energy. The first mountain we needed to cross was about 6,000 meters, about 20,000 feet, high. Given Mr. Jin's stamina, it would take at least 3 days. The path was marked everywhere by the advance team. I followed the team across glaciers and crevasses, marveling at the creator's craftsmanship. Before dark, we reached our first resting point. It was an ice cave. The entrance was taller than a person, but the space inside was ample. The ice stalactites on the ceiling had been cleared, and many warm sleeping bags and fuel canisters were stacked nearby. We would rest here for the night and cross the snowy mountain the next day. Entering the valley, Mr. Jin and the middle-aged man, not having received professional training, were quite exhausted after a day's walk. Pierre laid out warm sleeping bags for them inside, and they went to bed early. The others ate energy bars, sitting around, sharing their experiences. I loved this feeling. Strangers from all corners of the world gathered for the same purpose. I walked out of the ice cave and looked up at the Milky Way. The brilliant universe captivated me. It was the aspiration of countless epics and legends, and endless possibilities. I didn't know then that the tranquility of this day had exhausted all the good luck of this journey. The next morning, everyone got up early, because dawn comes much later in Tibet. It was already 10 o'clock by the time the sun truly rose. Mr. Jin was not in good shape. The altitude had worsened his sickness, and he needed almost 2 people to help him move forward. Fortunately, Mr. Jin had foresight. I only learned then that the old man had brought several Sherpas with him. They, familiar with the terrain, helped the old man arrange his protective gear, supporting him on either side as he continued upward. For some reason, even though the old man was wearing an oxygen mask, he gave me a sense of going to his death. As long as he reached that place, the old man was willing to pay any price. Due to the old man's physical condition, we had originally planned to cross the snow mountain that day and reach the supply point on the other side. However, once we reached the summit, a dense fog suddenly rolled in. I had never seen such a fog. At first, it was a thin veil in the air, then it slowly turned to a thick haze, And finally, we couldn't see the person in front of us. I wondered if it was my imagination, but I even felt like their voices had grown fainter. They were only a few feet in front of me, yet I felt they were tens of yards away. I could only rely on the safety rope tied to my body to ensure I wouldn't lose the team. At the same time, I had to constantly watch my footing. We were currently moving along the protruding rocks of the mountain ridge, with a bottomless abyss beside us. One wrong step could easily drag down everyone in front and behind. Many in the team were experienced. They kept talking, making sounds, and loudly reminding those behind them to watch out for danger. For some reason, I felt as if the fog had weight, like a giant hand pressing down on my shoulders, increasing my burden. In a short while, I was out of breath. Suddenly, I felt a huge force pulling me towards the cliff edge. At that moment, I felt as if all the blood in my body had frozen. Then I heard my teammates scream. The sensation of falling came over me. I felt myself dropping, but soon another huge tug left me hanging in midair. The teammate behind me had accidentally fallen, dragging me with him. Fortunately, those ahead reacted in time and held on to the rope. The fog was truly too thick. I could only hear my teammates' voices, watching the rope tied to my body disappear several yards in front of me. "Lee, are you okay?" The teammate below me was named Hardy. He was in his 30s, with curly hair and a friendly, outgoing personality. He had only been here for a few days but had already become friends with everyone. It was he who had pulled me down. "Hardy, I'm fine. Are you hurt?" Hardy said he was fine. He had just lost focus for a second and missed his step. Hardy apologized for pulling me down too. To ease my tension, Hardy said he had been in this situation before, and his teammates always managed to rescue him, so I shouldn't worry. After the initial panic, I also calmed down. Above us was the world's most professional team. This small incident was nothing to them. Hardy and I encouraged each other, chatting and laughing. I couldn't see him, nor could he see me, but our voices were light as we waited for rescue. Suddenly, Hardy's terrified voice came from the fog. "Lee, I think there's something next to me." I froze. No way, I thought. We're hanging in midair, on a snowy mountain. What could there be? But Hardy's voice grew more frantic. That thing seemed to be approaching him rapidly. "Lee, help me!" With a scream, silence fell in the fog. I anxiously called Hardy's name, but there was no response. A massive fear engulfed me. I shouted upwards, and my teammates quickly pulled me up. The safety rope behind me was broken. The break was very strange. After I recounted what happened, everyone looked at me with suspicion. "Lee, this rope is cut very cleanly, clearly with a knife," someone said. Several people held my small pocket knife, interrogating me. They believed I had deliberately cut the rope to save myself and had concocted a lie to deceive them. I was at a loss for words. Everyone thought I was the murderer. Mr. Jean said nothing, only demanding that we continue our journey. That night, we slept on the mountainside. I was bound and stuffed into a warm sleeping bag. A sense of unease gnawed at me. I had another nightmare. Hardy had fallen to the bottom of the cliff, torn into pieces, desperately pleading for my help. I struggled to back away, but Hardy, with severed limbs, suddenly stood up and staggered towards me. His face contorted in terror. He repeated, "There's something next to me. Something's been watching us. Lee, run." I woke from the dream, startled. Pierre sat beside me. "Hardy wasn't killed by me." "I know," he said. I looked at Pierre, shocked. Pierre didn't look at me, but began to recount an seemingly irrelevant story. About a year ago, Pierre received a mysterious invitation, asking him to visit a manor and tell stories about his explorations of the Himalayas. Pierre gladly went. It was a strange, traditional Chinese manor, incredibly archaic, without a trace of modern influence. Even the lighting inside was by candlelight. Pierre was led into the main hall. Soon after, an old man was wheeled in. Mr. Jean. At that time, he looked emaciated and frail, on the verge of death. The man pushing the wheelchair was the accompanying middle-aged man. The two politely entertained Pierre and meticulously questioned him about his climbing journeys. Pierre was naturally happy to answer. During the conversation, Pierre noticed that Mr. Jean seemed particularly interested in myths and legends, such as the Japanese Yukiana, European Yeti legends, and the Himalayan abominable snowman. Mr. Jean asked him if he had encountered anything strange on his travels. Pierre shook his head, stating that most legends were fabrications, concocted by local residents to attract tourists. Mr. Jean, however, told a different story. Hundreds of years ago, a group of monsters appeared in the Himalayas. No one knew where they came from. They attacked the people of Tibet. The emperor was enraged and gathered a group of brave warriors. They traveled thousands of miles to fight the monsters in the Himalayas. But the monsters were incredibly strong, and just as the warriors were in despair, a goddess descended from the heavens, bestowing divine light. The warriors received blessings and eventually turned the tide, vanquishing all the monsters and protecting the peace of Tibet. Mr. Jean said his ancestor was one of those warriors. He answered the call, left his hometown, and never returned. However, several years ago, he said his ancestor appeared to him in a dream, warning that the monsters were about to reappear. He had to ascend the sacred mountain and bathe in the divine light to finally stop this crisis. Pierre, naturally, didn't believe such fairy tales, but Mr. Jean offered a huge reward, hoping Pierre would help assemble a climbing team to take him to the sacred mountain. For the sake of the money, Pierre agreed. Only upon arriving here did he realize that things might not be so simple. The lucid members of the advance team also told him that there seemed to be something beyond human imagination on the mountain. They refused to go up the mountain again, so those people were assigned to Team 4, and he had hidden the truth from the others. Just as Pierre found Mr. Jean, wanting to give up this climbing expedition, Mr. Jean suddenly pulled out photos of his wife and daughter, threatening him that he must take her to the destination. At that moment, I realized that Mr. Jean had control over all our families. From then on, Pierre understood that this might be a suicide mission. Otherwise, why would he use our families to force us forward? I was horrified, never imagining this old man could be so sinister. After saying that, I wanted Pierre to untie me so I could fight the old man. Pierre shook his head, explaining that many of the climbing team members were Mr. Jean's subordinates, and they even carried guns. If a conflict arose, we had no chance of winning. However, he had arranged for Team 4, who were left behind, to find an opportunity to escape and call the police. Pierre was controlling the team's speed to buy time and increase everyone's chances of survival. Now, Pierre and I were on the same side. The team continued to advance in this oppressive atmosphere. Due to the deaths, everyone spoke less. On the 5th day, we finally reached the second snow mountain. Pierre planned to find an opportunity to let me go. The supplies along the way were enough for me to get out of the mountains, but Mr. Jin's subordinates were watching closely, and there was no chance to escape. At this point, apart from me, Pierre, and a few others, most of the climbers didn't know the truth behind the events. The fog never dissipated, but fortunately, there was no storm. However, an accident still occurred. Although no one died, 6 people developed various problems and couldn't continue. At this point, communications also failed. This fog was like a shroud, engulfing everything. The team became divided. Some demanded to turn back immediately to rescue the injured, but Mr. Jean disagreed, ordering everyone to continue forward. A quarrel ensued. Yongwen suddenly pulled out a pistol and fired a shot into the air. Everyone was startled. Keep going, or die. Reluctantly, the injured had to be abandoned on the cold snowy mountain. Mr. Jean wasn't even willing to leave them much in the way of supplies, simply ordering everyone to depart immediately. Yongwen expressionlessly shot and killed a strong objector. Now, no one dared to refuse. As we crossed the second snow mountain, the fog finally lifted, but it was immediately replaced by a blizzard. We were pinned down on the mountainside, caught between a rock and a hard place. The biting wind felt like a sharp blade, a torment beyond measure. One person suddenly started taking off their clothes, laughing as they did so, muttering incoherently. They had gone mad. Under the immense pressure, their mind had completely fractured. I huddled next to Pierre, trying to press myself into the snow. For some reason, I recalled that nightmare again. I seemed to see the giant figure behind the mountain reappearing. It stood there, silently watching us struggle. Only this time, I saw clearly, it was the deceased Hardy. His face was rotten, his stomach cut open, blood flowing out and dissipating into the air with black fluid. He looked at us with pity, then turned and vanished into the blizzard. Then, an avalanche struck. It was Ray and Dondrup who dug me out of the snow. When I woke up, I was in a dark ice cave. The sunlight couldn't possibly penetrate the thick ice, but everything around me was clearly visible. Gigantic ice stalactites hung from above, like inverted icicles. If they fell, it would be like being pierced by countless arrows. Ray helped me up and poured me a cup of hot water. For some reason, even after drinking it, the chill in my body remained, a bone-chilling cold. They told me that after Team 1 and Team 2 merged, they arrived at the coordinates Mr. Jean provided. Unexpectedly, the destination was an ice crevasse, almost bottomless. They used all the ropes they had brought, barely managing to reach the bottom. This was beneath the ice layer, a complete underground kingdom. However, the ice crevasse contained countless caves, and within those caves were abysses. People kept dying unexpectedly along the way. Finally, after only the two of them were left, they encountered me, carried down by the snow. How lucky, isn't it? Ray said. In the vast snowy mountains, beneath tens of thousands of ice crevasses, we could still meet. It's truly like the goddess's blessing. But before that, the two of them pulled me along, wanting to show me something interesting. The ice wall in front of us was like a giant museum. Mammoths, saber-toothed tigers, even ichthyosaurs. It was like a frozen world. I marveled at it. These animals seemed to have been arranged neatly, all facing in one direction. I walked and photographed, hoping to document this incredible sight, but the next moment, I fell into an ice cave. Enduring the pain, I fumbled for my flashlight in my backpack. Beneath the ice, a row of Qing dynasty soldiers were frozen solid. I pulled out my camera to take a picture, only to find that the soldiers' eyeballs were still moving. They stared at me, their gaze following my every move. This was impossible. Fear, only fear. I thought of Mr. Jin's fairy tale. His ancestors were Qing dynasty people. They came to Tibet to fight monsters and finally received the goddess's protection. The Battle of Gorkha, Dondrup said, emerging from somewhere I hadn't seen. Fukingan led the Solon soldiers from northeast China on a 1,000-mile journey to Tibet, defeating the Nepalese invasion in the Himalayas. This was recorded in history. Dondrup began to tell a third story. Emperor Qianlong had initially been indifferent to this, but then he suddenly met a strange lama in the old summer palace. Only then did he decide to send troops. However, both the Eight Banners and the Han Chinese armies found it difficult to fight in the high altitudes. Qianlong could only mobilize Solon soldiers from outside the Great Wall to enter Tibet. They needed to defeat the Nepalese invasion, and at the same time, their true goal was to find the goddess Dagazog Sangma. The mysterious Lama had prophesied the future of the Qing dynasty. He told Emperor Qianlong that if he wanted the Qing dynasty to last for 10,000 years, he must find Dagazog Sangma in her sleeping temple, awaken the goddess, and seek her protection. She was the last Buddha mother in the world, sleeping beneath Poetus Very Peak in the Himalayas. A unit of Solon soldiers, composed of shamans from northeast China, finally found the temple. With just a faint trace of divine light, the Solon soldiers became invincible. They gained the ability to fight on the roof of the world, easily defeating Nepal and forcing their surrender. However, the unit that entered the temple never returned. They would serve as attendants to the goddess, sleeping with her for eternity. As Dondrup finished speaking, the Qing soldiers emerged from the wall. The next moment, they transformed into decaying skeletons, lunging at me. Now you have entered the temple too. You must worship the goddess with them, forever and ever. Ray and Dondrup grabbed me and ran. The creatures in the walls had all come alive. Dagazog Sangma governed animal reproduction, but to the goddess, perhaps all living beings in this world were merely her livestock. Behind us, an avalanche of white bones and rotting flesh surged towards us. Lee, don't go. Stay with me. Hardy's voice came from behind me. He too had become one of the skeletons, his voice hoarse as he crawled towards me. Countless vengeful spirits let out piercing wails, calling for me to stay. Things I had never seen before followed us from the bottomless abyss below, creating more rustling sounds. They were everywhere. I was dragged forward by Ray and Dondrup. I didn't know where I was going, nor did I want to know. Suddenly, the space seemed to open up. Above, the ice ceiling was carved with the Milky Way and constellations. Around us was black ice. Below, the noble goddess slept beneath the ice, elegant and benevolent, radiating a green glow. I broke free from their hands and knelt, caressing the goddess's face through the ice. She simply slept there, bringing me peace. The surrounding clamor gradually faded, and the world began to feel ethereal. My eyes were fixed only on this goddess. She slowly opened her eyes. I no longer felt cold, no longer felt fear, nor exhaustion. It was like lying in my mother's arms on a warm afternoon. The ice was melting, or perhaps I was melting. I merged with the ice, as if entering an endless deep sea, moving towards that green light. Nothing could stop me. I would become the goddess's yak, falling into her embrace, receiving her protection. It felt like a mother's gentle caress. A soft touch enveloped me, and the world turned green. I could no longer feel the stickiness on my body or the foul stench at my nose. I no longer wondered why Ray was here, nor Mr. Jin's true purpose, nor whether Pierre would escape. I just wanted to forget everything, hallucinations, reason, hope, everything. Here, in this 10,000-foot glacier, at the roof of the world, witnessed by the Milky Way, constellations, caves, and storms, I would sleep with the goddess Dagazog Sangma, for all eternity. I woke up from a dream. Sunlight streamed warmly through the window. It was Saturday morning, 7 o'clock. I pulled the covers over my head. That's the end of the story, folks. Thanks for reading.